KC-12, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, it is speed 1. Left land, swim west, copy. Speed 1. Crossing 21. Crossing at 24 is runway.
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapathy, your host.
Just 70, roger, report type southeast, Greenwich, speed 4, runway 28, and field still active.
I'm sure you're all familiar with that iconic photograph where General Niazi is signing the instrument of surrender. Next to him is General Jagjit Singh Arora, and to his left is a gentleman from All India Radio holding the mic. And behind him are Air Marshal Diwan, General JFR Jacob, General Sagat Singh. And holding General JFR Jacob's left hand and peering over his shoulder and looking at the momentous occasion is a young flying officer who is our guest today, Flying Officer Sundaram Krishnamurthy. Flying Officer Krishnamurthy was commissioned into the helicopter stream of the Indian Air Force in 1968. He flew helicopters during the 1971 war. He was posted in Car Nicobar, participated in the 6th expedition to Antarctica when he was with the very secretive Aviation Research Center. And after leaving the service, he continued flying in the Civil Street, particularly offshore flying. He's been involved subsequently with training, safe flight safety. He's also the author of a book called Through the Rotor Disc that I will include a link to in the show notes. I strongly recommend picking up that book and reading the wonderful stories that he and his wife have put together. But more importantly, the proceeds of that book go for the rehabilitation of paraplegics. So we have a wonderful guest with us today and we're going to have a great conversation. But first things first, welcome to the program, sir, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Yes, you're welcome, Gana. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So, sir, we love to get to know our guests. Just love to know where you grew up. What was your motivation to join the service? What was that initial journey like? What aircraft did you train on, leading up perhaps to the eve of the 71 war?
We spent a lot of time after shifting to Chennai in Tambaram. We had our own house and some land around. And you'll be surprised, the gentleman who kind of influenced me is my namesake, AVM retired S. Krishnamurthy, HF-24 pilot. When he did the FIS, he was our next door neighbor. We used to watch him going and coming to the Air Force Station, Tambaram, from our house, which was hardly about a kilometer and a half, almost a mile. Okay. And that remained in my mind. Then we shifted from Tambaram to proper town, and the school and the college had the facility of NCC those days. And I was a very keen member, active member of the NCC, learning the intricacies of the rifle, comradeship, and what is there in the armed forces. And my instructor always used to say, if you guys don't do well, you won't come to the level of the NDA, that is your National Defense Academy. So this made an important kind of a point in my mind that our effort is to come to the standards which are expected for NDA. And I did. And when I was selected and went to the academy, it was a great feeling. And elated I was. It was a beautiful time I spent, and I keep telling all the youngsters whoever I meet that it's worthwhile going through that beautiful institution, only one of its kind in the Asia continent, and get through the training. This is how I happened to land up in academy and the Air Force, thanks to my own namesake.
Wonderful. Oh, what aircraft were in Tambaram at that time? Howards and Tiger Moths?
I think he was training to be an instructor. So Harvards were there. I don't think HT2, I don't think HT2s were introduced by then. I don't remember what could have been the this thing, but definitely my predecessor should be able to tell us who will be who which was the aeroplane and they were yeah, and he made a great impression. And only later, almost 18, 20 years in the Air Force, I happened to meet him. And yet another gentleman who was in Tambaram, who introduced, who influenced a whole lot of families in Tambaram was, I think he retired as an AVM or an Air Marshal, Anna Swami Sridharan. And he, his family made a great impression amongst the residents in our, say, local, I would say colony or the village. And these two gentlemen made things different in my life.
Great, sir. So, when you came to the Air Force Academy, what aircraft were there? What was your training there like? Any experiences?
No, we were introduced into HT2s and in Jodhpur, Harvards, and we were expecting, at least I was expecting to go to Allahabad to see a new place, but the HTS shifted to Jodhpur itself. So we were one of the initial guys who were trained in Jodhpur on Bell 47G3, and it was fun to start with. I thought if this is going to be the helicopter, I don't think I can get along. It is to dance the moment you touch the controls, but the touch, the instructors were kind enough to tell us that you have to hold it like a pot, mud pot, in the darkness you are trying to drink water. That is the word, the sentence they used. You are lifting it up, and when you are keeping it back, you are going to be very careful. Be very careful. I said yes. This made a lot of sense to me. And Bell 47G3 was a challenge to fly, which I flew later on for crop dusting. That is after leaving the Air Force. So they say no, everything comes to a square one. So it the training aircraft. After I left the Air Force and joined the civil flying, I started flying again with the Boeing 47G3. See, that is the difference.
Great. And, so this is a two-seat bubble canopy, the egg beater kind of an aircraft, they call it, isn't it?
Yes, yes. If need be, we can put the third seat around, uh, provided you remove the controls, second controls. The cyclic part of it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And sometimes even those days the election flying used to be there. But I started my election flying with Bell 206, which was like a Maruti car with a kind of more front two seats and rear three seats.
Ah, okay. Right. So then, you were posted to an operational squadron, and I presume you converted to the Me-4 there?
Uh, you know, the moment we passed out of HTS, we used to look forward where will be our posting. First, the place. Secondly, we had not much of choice. We had only two types of helicopter those days. One is the Alvet 3 and the Me-4s. We had Me-4 in the form of 107 helicopter unit in Jodhpur itself. And that made a great amount of impression on us because it was a huge one. It can carry 10 people. And when it started, it made a roaring noise. And it had, in the cockpit, we had a gearbox control which said four gears. We honestly thought it had gears like the car, but it was to engage the rotors with the engine, and that is a typical way of Russian ensuring safety in the air. Beautiful aeroplane, and I realized in the modern language it may have been called as cattle class helicopter, but later, barely 3 years later, it proved to be the cattle class proved to be the winner. So, Me4 is the one I love. When I think back, it could take any kind of terrain. It could go to this thing. They said it cannot go beyond, you cannot go and land in Nagaland high helipads, but we have landed all over. So I have no complaints on the MIFO. And added to that is the war we fought in that, carrying the local soldiers. If it was any other aeroplane, we couldn't have done it, either a Chetak or even a Mi-8. It couldn't have been done. Mi-8 engine couldn't have taken the dust and the grass which we kicked up. Mi-4s could take it. Mi-4s could take it, please understand that.
Great. So your operational posting was in the Northeast, and this was in
Yes,
68,
it was
69, sometime
Ashimara.
then?
No, 68 June, we landed up after 4 days of journey in a place called Ashimara, where the train stopped at 2 o'clock at night. If you hesitated, the train would start all over again. So you'll have to kind of think. So we had warned the helper in the first class, please wake us up in time, and please Lord, don't let the train start before we get on. So it was very interesting. Landed up there, and then we were expecting some kind of a vehicle. There was no vehicle. Then we said, let's go by the rickshaw. So we asked the rickshaw, that gentleman, he was very keen that you guys take one each. Don't just join. So we had our own boxes, our own beddings. So one each, and those fellows were thrilled. And we landed up at the gate, and from there, of course, we went and disturbed somebody, and somewhere we slept. We opened our own bedding and slept. The next morning they said, please go to the rear portion of the mess, where there are old quarters, barracks there. Please make yourself comfortable. So we were expecting some skeletons there, but fortunately we were whole lot of pilot officers and flying officers who were relegated like us. We were all there. But the beauty was, it was very next to the fence, where we had to see only tea gardens cut and neat, like the NDA cadets lined up for parade. The tea garden very neatly kept, and that was a beautiful sight. So I mean, when you think back, we have actually should not have no cribs at all. Beautiful life, and to top that, you know who the station commander was? Late Air Chief Marshal that time, Group Captain L.M. Khatri. And I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better person. And he had kind words for us, all the young pilot officers. On Saturdays, he said, please assemble. I want to give you a glass of beer from my side, but the next glass will be on you all. So that was an understanding we had, and it was beautiful. So the Ashimara stay on, in addition to all the good things I'm talking about, we flew for the then royal family of Sikkim and the royal Bhutanese family. So yes, and we couldn't have, he preferred a MIFO, not a Chetak, and we put cushions and curtains, and we made it a VIP helicopter. Only thing we didn't give him was a rain cape, because MIFOs had the habit of leaking oil and water when it rained. So, but he enjoyed, like me, he enjoyed the MIFO rides. That time, his son, the prince, was in Darjeeling, in the, I think it's called North Point. And he used to come, whenever he used to come on weekends or holidays, we used to go and pick him up and bring. That was a trip. And in addition to all, the old courier, Assam courier, never used to land in Hasimara. So we used to make trips to Bagdogra. That was our weekend trips. So that was a civilization, so to say. Not that Asimara lacked anything. We had three gardens all around us. Very serious, sincere tea garden clubs were there. And then they showed pictures in 35 not just 16 35 So we were up to date with the pictures and things like that. And radios were there, so to keep us in touch with the outside world. That is how this. And to top it all, I volunteered for anything and everything whenever some long duration stay came in Bhutan or Sikkim. So I spent one winter, I think it was 70 winter, I spent in Bhutan waiting for the snow to come with a camera. I borrowed a camera, I put a color film in it and waiting for the snow. But till I left, the snow fellow said he will not come. The day I left, very next day it snowed. So I asked General Squad Leader Karyappa, my commander. We went in the helicopter again and took the photograph all over. So that was in my album for a long period, but now I am searching for the album In which house it is there, my son or my house, other one, I do not know. So, but we are still searching. That goes for the 71 war photographs too. I am still searching. If I had those photographs, this book would have contained better photographs than what it is having. So but that is life when photography was a kind of luxury, and nearest photo studio was some 10 kilometers away, and every time you went and gave and received, he said he gave an appointment 2 weeks later because he sent it somewhere else. Like that, it was all fun. After Asimara, when the command found that our flying wasn't sufficient to make us fully ops, they posted, would you believe, Kana, they posted some 17 young flying officers to Kumbigram, that is Silchar. So we four went from Asimara, two or three came from Chabua, some people came from Western region, Western Command, and some were already there. In all, we were 17. The station squadron commander and the flight commander literally had to fly day in and day out, and all ops flying. We used to be just told, just get inside whichever helicopter available to you, and we will fly. Somebody will land in some helipad, you will get on, and other one will get in. Like that. In 1 year, they made us all fully ops and categorized. It is as if someone thought ahead that these pilots will be required for the war. From 70 to 71, we were ready in those flying, and only thing we lacked was extensive operational flying. But the blessing came in the war field activity and war field flying. We were like we were like the infantry soldiers, literally living off the land, switching off and going to sleep under the helicopter. When the other guys maintain the helicopter, we join them sometimes. Sometimes they used to say, "Sir, you go back to sleep, you go to fly next morning." So those 9, 10 days we had beautiful time. When I say beautiful time, it was not anything to do with the roses and the garlands, but it came later. That time we were only interested in the ops flying, and sometimes we even survived with the chakarparas of the soldiers. So that is how our flying went in the wartime.
Right, right. So, can you talk about some of the sorts of sorties or missions that you were executing before the war, sir? And during your operational stage when you were based in Kubigram, or these were army support, Kazovac, those sorts of things.
What we must remember is, except for picking up the bailed out pilots, helicopter in the Air Force was not utilized for anything. The helicopters were essentially for army, paramilitary, and civil administration. And truly, we were kept busy day in and day out, night in and night out, with flying for army, with the flying for BSF, with the flying for paramilitary, other police services in the northeast, and of course the civil military. The civil administration required our help along with the army when these refugees came from Bangladesh. Once you understand how the refugees chose to come to India, that we must remember Bengal and Assam were together once upon a time, very long back. Then the great division of Bengal Assam took place during the Englishman time. Then further on, the Bengal was divided into East and West Bengal. East Bengal went to Bangladesh and West Bengal remained in India. So there was no difference in the language, cultural habits, and the rest of the things. So when these guys were suppressed, beaten, killed by the so-called Pakistani West soldiers in Bangladesh, they just chose to walk across the tea gardens and cross into India, where the line was very, very not discernible at all. As soon as they entered India, they were relieved, and Indian counterparts gave them the place and food and water. The only unfortunate part was they were driven out of their house and they walked for miles together, and that took a toll, and they brought in a lot of diseases. And when the diseases spread, epidemics started, typhoid, cholera, things like that. That is the time we had to worry because it started affecting the local population. Civil administration made a camp, took the army's help, and the army in turn took our help, helicopters' help, and we earmarked places for their camps. Mind you, in our area, late Mrs. Gandhi visited at least thrice just to supervise the refugee colonies. And you can imagine the importance he showed. And later, when the war was kind of thrust on us, she even came during the war. I mean, it was all a kind of trips which we will call it as hush hush, but it was a beautiful. Kumbhigram, we used to think it was a punishment posting, kahan aa gaye hum. But when I saw the number of helicopters and aeroplanes landing from various places with various VIPs and our own work chartered out for us, I realized that it was some previous births kind of good being that has given us these kind of sites, these kind of activities, these kind of winning for the country.
Visual to Fort Ridgeway. Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection for the midway, and field selected.
So, March was when the big crackdown, the massacre. So, at what point did you, the tempo of your training, the type of your training, and, the preparation, you begin to get a sense that, hey, we may actually be seeing action through 71. What was your preparation like?
Between June 70 and March 71, we had amassed some flying, but specific syllabus were not followed. Specific syllabus, we had not completed the syllabus, so to say. So when we started detachments in Teliamura, whereas Teliamura is about 40 kilometers from Agartala, and that was off location for 16 Corps. I hope I'm right with the number. It's General Sagat Singh's Corps. 4 Corps, sorry, not 16, 4 Corps. And when we started doing detachments, and whenever we didn't go on the detachment, because night flying was not possible in Kumbhigram, hilly area, we practiced in Agartala, we practiced in Guwahati, some places or the other. We completed a kind of a syllabus, and quickly we were made to appear in the catboat. All of us got some CY, DY, and things like that. The flying minimum category required for carrying a personnel in the helicopter. Otherwise, empty helicopter, anyone could fly. So, from March, when late Sheikh Mujib went into the Ramna racecourse ground and declared independence, so to say, independence within the inverted commas, and Bangla culture cannot be destroyed. That is where Operation Searchlight started. That is where the army, Pakistan army, went, ransacked and killed as many number as possible, and started destroying their libraries, their cultural activities, and things like that. So this is where the problem started. If they had not done this, they may not have lost the Bangladesh, the East Pakistan, to any other reason. And when they did it, and the refugees came, and the refugees had to be sent back as per Indira Gandhi, we had to kind of take the yes, the response in the positive manner only by a war. That was understood very clearly, and they played into their own hands, their own problems by attacking us in the west. The moment they did it, Indian army was waiting from the north, northwest. I'm talking only of the eastern sector. From the north, northwestern sector, army wanted to just enter. But East Pakistan, the army in East Pakistan that time knew that the attack will only come from north, northwest. So they had defended it very, very carefully. This was understood very clearly by General Sagat Singh. And when he was told to look after southeast, that is from Agartala side, and not to cross Ganga, not to cross Meghna, your hop order said your limitation is only this much. Do not enter anywhere else. The offensive will be done by the north, northwest. You do the defensive part. But as the war went through, when he realized the north was not making any cut through, he said, I'm going to take the soldiers as close as possible to Dacca. I wouldn't say I was a witness, but I know very clearly that he was told, do not disobey. He said, yes, he will disobey. And when we crossed the Meghna, when we did the Sylhet landings, we realized that the helicopter could be utilized without any problem. The pilots were good. The helicopter was good without any problem. The maintenance crew was the better fighters, better infantrymen than the infantry soldiers themselves, because they kept the helicopter without light, without rest, traveling by road and reaching the next place and maintaining the helicopter. And we did wonderfully well in Sylhet. After seeing the flying circus, so to say, this idea was mooted by General Sagat Singh to a fellow Rajput, late Chandan Singh Sahab. That time he was the group captain commanding Air Force Station Jorhat. He retired as AVM later on, and I worked under him in ARC for a short while. So I was very happy. And he and Sagat Singh joined together and put up a case through the telephone to the Eastern Air Command that we will want to utilize the helicopter and we want to just airdrop the soldiers, nothing else, no offensive role. So it was accepted. Initially, we were told only to stick to what our role was, that is cashback and supply dropping. But when this Sylhet was a success, without even a small incident, the Eastern Command had no hesitation to tell us, go ahead. So that is how, by now, the helicopter, two from Chabua, two from Asimara and one from Chabua joined us. So we had some 13 helicopters. At any given time, 9 or 10 will be flying, and 1 or 2 will be pressed upon for Kazakhstan, and 1 or 2 were under maintenance. And Kumbigram was just about a 1 hour flight. We used to go there and get the thing and done. Some maintenance done and come. We didn't want to start anything big as far as the maintenance concerned in Agartala, because Agartala was overcrowded in any case. Then the idea came for Kailash Shahar, where Kilo flight was being trained. Then again it was ruled out. Kumbigram was being kept as a maintenance background, and we used to go fly and come back. So by the time the Meghna crossing came, which was the climax of the war, we were all trained, we were all good enough to see what couldn't be seen outside in the dark. And before, instrumentation wasn't great as far as night flying was concerned. We had UV lights, ultraviolet lights, but that wasn't working. And that stand that had 2-3 connections, like an old table lamp, and it used to fall away, and whenever it used to let us down. So what we did was, we had learned to fly in the darkness, almost hover level to fly, just go touchdown, land, wait for the soldiers to drop off and take off and come back. Mind you, please, we had something like 5,000 people dropped maybe 5,000 number of sorties all put together. We had, fortunately, God was with us, no casualties and no incidents, no tail touch, no rotor touch, no rotor tip touch. Yes, I think one soldier died. That was because he was shot from the ground and the unfortunate bullet went into him. That's all. Otherwise, as far as we were concerned, the helicopter crew were concerned, may it be helicopter, uh, mm, air crew, the ground maintenance crew, and the supporting crew. We were all safe and we all came back together. That is where, when they said surrender today, please send 6 helicopters, not six. We went 10 helicopter load full in the 6 helicopters. And we were the witness to a momentous situation in the world where a genuine surrender took place by a country. Whereas in the Second World War, two different kind of surrender took place, and both in a luxurious liner and on luxurious 5-star, 6-star hotel.
Right. Can you describe some of your personal missions and experiences? I've also spoken to squad leader Push Pued earlier on his experiences. So I'd just love to hear firsthand some of your sorties, some of the things that happened to you.
We youngsters in Silat operation, we were doing more of groundwork than actual flying, but we did get a few sorties and we also knew what was happening. But by the time the Meghna crossing came, we were kind of active with the ground crew, active with, there was no fuel. We used to kind of literally fuel each other helicopter with buckets. I mean, unheard of in life. Okay, because a Bowser couldn't come. Finally, when they landed up, that was the time when we wound up the war. But when before the Bowser came, 2, 3 helicopters used to go to Agartala, bring tank full, and from there it used to be distributed. And don't ask me, because there was no safety standards followed, quality standards followed. We did a lot of, say, in the typical Air Force term, jigri pugri, but we did. And mind you, again, we were safe enough not to have a finger pointing at us that you did this because that is why it happened. Okay, so one such incident, that is my first story in the book, is Doc Sridharan. Now he is retired Air Commodore, settled in Pune. He and I were detailed for a night flying for dropping a set of soldiers and I think a brigadier sahab. So we were briefed, we go there, just fly straight. Time is about, say, 10 minutes, let us say. And when you see anything clear, just land there, drop them and come. The area is absolutely free of the offensive firing. So we were getting ready to go. The helicopter was getting delayed. So we were wondering why. So we asked the gunner, who is the load master, he said, what happened? He said, sir, one soldier has misplaced his rifle in this melee and he's trying to still look, because it's no use going him alone without a firearm. So we said, let the other helicopter go. We were kind of, we will wait for him. So finally, after about 7-8 minutes, this gentleman comes, sir, he has come, we can go. And we went, dropped them, we did the further flying also and came back. The flying finished, we were resting, and somewhere around 10 or 10:30 at night, Doc and I were called. They said, please take this helicopter. It has about sufficient fuel for about half an hour, 45 minutes flight. And there is a casevac to be done and kindly do it. We said, okay. And the joke those days were, there was not enough number of batteries, because all the local shops, airport shops, everything finished with the thing, and our stock has to come from some Kumbhigram, which was not stocked for this many number of batteries. They said you must carry a serviceable torch. So if between the flight engineer, flight gunner, pilot and co-pilot, if we managed one serviceable torch, it was a big joke. So anyway, we went, and when we picked up the casualty, mind you, that is where the life comes to a kind of a circle. This was the gentleman, this was the soldier who delayed us in the morning. And his tenure in the warfield was short down to about 6 hours or so. And he was gravely injured, but he survived. That we checked later. But we put him in the helicopter and brought him back. So this is my one thing which I will never forget. The helicopter, the incident in which you will remember for your lifetime. The other things are very, very normal, because normal time would have been great, but the normal thing is when we used to come back, the Russian equipment had holes all over, but none reached the vital part of the engine or the vital part of the rotor gear system. So we never were kind of disturbed for the operational flying as far as the ground fire was concerned. Ground firing took place very kind of, as they used to just fight. It was like a kind of Tommy guns firing all over. Fortunately, there was no air. We had absolute air superiority, so to say. We had only firing from the ground. And when we used to hear some tap noise, we used to avoid that area and fly over. But the fortunate part of it was the flying was never beyond 10-15 minutes. It was not a long flying to kind of test our patience. We used to kind of sometimes come as low as 100 feet, or sometimes used to come as much as 800 feet. But when we used to see Agartala, we used to quickly come and land, because the idea was to save fuel. So this one thing I'll never forget, Dana. The destiny which takes you into the field and the way you come out, it is not written on everyone that you will get hit. It happens to only a few. It happens only when you are not expecting. See, this kind of Vedant, so to say, with this kind of talks, philosophical talks can go through after the war. But during the war, you are not expecting any, you are not thinking of anything. This, I think, one thing I realized, I learned in the warfield as early as 1971.
Great. Let's come to that iconic photograph where you're peeping over General Jacob's left shoulder. What was the mood like at that signing ceremony? What was Nyazi's mood, Aurora's mood?
Gana, the surrender should have taken place a day earlier. They were delaying it inordinately, hoping like anything that the UN will declare ceasefire, or the 7th Fleet will manage to enter Bay of Bengal. Now, if India today is steadfast with Russia in the present conflict in the Europe, it is not because of anything. It is because that the Russian submarines came into Bay of Bengal and did not let the UK or UN interfere in any of our war efforts. Mind you, I have learned after the war, not during the war, that there were naval pilots ready to go, because there was no endurance in the in their planes. They were having only one way through. If they are refueled fully, they were ready for kamikaze. They were ready to go and hit any ship in the 7th Fleet and die for the country. Fortunately, that occasion didn't come because of the Russian submarines. So when the surrender didn't take place on the 15th, and UN did not declare ceasefire, again because of the veto by Russia, and the 7th Fleet could not enter Bay of Bengal, General Jacob made a trip again from Calcutta and told, gentlemen, you are at liberty not to surrender. we shall go back, but you will be at the mercy of the local population who are hell bent upon killing you one by one, not together, one by one. So you are most welcome either to surrender and enjoy the Geneva Convention benefits or get killed by the local. Why get killed by the local? The army was not in the road. The Pakistani army were all in their camps, safely locked up. They didn't want any offensive fight on the roadside. But those who were in the field, they were in the field. But this was Dacca. Ultimately, General Niazi supposed to have said, yes, I shall surrender this day. By lunch in Agartala, when whole lot of helicopters were there and whole lot of army, kind of, it was all full. We were all waiting for the word. Suddenly our flight commander came and said, 6 helicopters will go, which meant 6 crews. Then later on, he himself said, what he was not announcing loudly is, as many number can go in any of the helicopters, please go. So we went in those 6 or 7 helicopters, and when we landed in Dhaka, 2 satellite airfields are there, and we found no parking. We found our own parking and landed there. The locals, they were all happy. They wanted to lift us on their shoulder and carry us to the sea. We expected the surrender to take place in the airfield itself. I mean, that was our expectation. But the army said the place where Mujib stood and declared independence, that will be the place for the surrender. That is how Ramana Racecourse, that particular spot was chosen. Hurriedly, they had put 2 tables together. Remind you, if you see the photograph, there's not even a tablecloth. Chairs were picked up from here and there and put. Minimum 2 chairs are required, and they managed 1 chair, 3, and they put 2 tables together, and it was free for all. Please believe me, Pakistan army still had arms with them. Indian army had taken a calculated risk to tell them, keep your arm. Why? Because the locals were after them. The Bengalis of that area were after them to take spite on them. So they were told, keep. This is a calculated gamble they had taken, but luckily nothing went amiss. And then the moment the surrender thing, the document was signed and the pistol was handed over, then they were all told, please, now you are our PWOs, put all your arms together and heap them up, and please walk into the barracks. Your own barracks, now as a prisoners of war, not as your barracks, it is our barracks now. That is how the situation in the Dhaka was. It was free for all, it was crowded, it was happiness all over, it was kind of thanks to you guys, your neighbors, this, all kinds of talk were there. There was a guy who said, please come in my car, you take my car free and go. I said, no such thing, no such thing will do. And they were ready to give anything. One guy pulled out a telephone in the airport and said, sir, this is for you. Kind of, he couldn't even cut it. He couldn't even pull it out of the wall. He cut it and gave me the thing. I said, please, keep on. He said, no, sir, we have to give you some kind of memento from the warfield. I said, warfield memento, we will pick it up, but don't give it from the airfield. So this is the situation which was there. Happy kind of situation. But at the same time, no one could imagine, no one could tell what could happen in the next few minutes. That's how it was.
Fascinating. Wow.
JFR Jacob, report-IP-Southeast, connection for midway, yield selected.
So we'll change gears now to 2 other interesting phases, which was Car Nicobar and the Antarctica expedition. So tell us more about what happened there. And first we'll start with Car Nic. It's I think the southernmost point of Indian territory latitude wise, isn't it? And it's almost Indonesia.
Out of 192 or so islands, about 10, 11 were habitable. So one of them was Car Nicobar, where freshwater reserves were there. Englishmen had done their homework. Car Nicobar was as big as Delhi town of those days. Okay, and sweet water, potable water was available in plenty. Very nearby, there was an island called Kamorta, where people used to use the coconuts facing the sky, and the water falling on them will be used as their reserve.
My
I mean,
God.
I'm giving you some funny thing which we saw ourselves in the 1 year stay I had there, and there was no way to store water. Can you imagine? I mean, water in abundance. It's like Meghalaya, Shirapunji. The highest rainfall in the world is in Shirapunji, but in the when the winter comes, there is no water. So similarly, in the island Kamorka, there are many other islands where there was no fresh water supply at all. So one of the islands is an active volcano. One of the islands had only snakes and lizards, and other things were so small and so big and things like that. Great Nicobar, Car Nicobar, Great Andamans, Small Andamans, the islands which are close to Burma. I think very close to Burma, two of the islands we gave away to Burma as goodwill in the early days of our freedom.
Mhm.
When the Englishmen gave the islands to us, not to Burma, they thought they will trouble India. They will trouble the new nation administratively. Please remember, sometimes when you want to point a finger at someone, three fingers are pointing at you. So, to expand that analogy, they gave you a problem, but they gave us actually the entire Bay of Bengal to us. Now, our exclusive economic zone, our rights over this Bay of Bengal is entirely with India, because we encompass the mainland and the islands. And of course, Bangladesh takes a bit of this and Burma takes a little bit of the Bay of Bengal. So they, because our penal settlement was in Port Blair, and they thought, like Papillon, no one will escape from the Andaman. Andaman became a habitable island, and today it is going to be like a kind of new aircraft carrier, immobile aircraft carrier in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So south of 10-degree channel and north of 10-degree channel, both the places are occupied, both the places are habitable, and Car Nicobar is from the staging post level, it has become an FBSU as Air Force Station, full-fledged Air Force Station, where Navy also has taken a certain amount of space. And the Andaman Island is habitable. Only thing is getting beyond its capacity. But again, as the human being have been doing all along, the extra people will always go to the nearest island and live. That's all. So these are the islands which are habitable, and we had a wonderful time when we had to kind of go around telling various people that yes, the Navy and Air Force have come together and we will be looking after you all, don't worry. And Karnik, and particularly Car Nicobar, had already been so-called civilized in the modern terms with the Christian missionaries. So we had no problem. The Andaman had a whole lot of salespersons from various countries, Burmese, South Indian, Bengalis, Indian, general Indian, like that. So it was all fun to understand our own country, which was living in small denominations in those islands. It was a mainland in those islands. So that is my wonderful, sweet experience of Andaman Nicobar. But when we did flying, and I was utilized for Antarctica later on because I was qualified on offshore flying. This where I realized that destiny. I realized the destiny after the retirement of the Air Force, from the Air Force, because there are certain things which you didn't think of comes to you because you have done something in the past. You are qualified in the past. So
Right.
these things come to you only when you go through it. And it was beautiful experience. It was a kind of, how one should say is that you deserved it or you didn't deserve it. And this is the kind of, you get what you sow and you get what you imagine. This was the Car Nicobar Andaman experience. Yesterday there was a question in one of the TV shows about the coastline of Andaman Nicobar Islands. So I was telling the who was sitting next to me is, this is the answer is Andaman Nicobar Islands, and the other person said Gujarat coast. So some such thing went through. So this kind of knowledge comes to you when you go there yourself and see for yourself. And later in my civil life, in a Bell 412, we flew from Singapore, refueling at various places, landing in 2, 3 other extra places. We brought the helicopter via Calcutta, via Rangoon, via Thailand to Bombay. I remembered my Karnik days. Yes, beautiful. That was the experience. Yes, Gana. One thing what we must remember is, the helicopter may have floats, may have maves, may have rafts for your survival. Idea is not to ditch the helicopter in the water. So we flew from center of the island to the other center of the island. We did not touch the coast. I hope you are getting what I'm trying to tell you. When you see an island, we went to the island, and from there we set course to the next island. But when I was telling you about 10-degree channel between the small islands of north of Car Nicobar to small Andamans, there is 10-degree channel which is the deepest in that area. And for 40 minutes you have to fly over the water. That is the only time we crossed our fingers and flew. Otherwise, the navigation was very simple. No shortcuts, no cross thinking. Go from one island to another island. And till the Campbell Bay, when we went, we used to go from, that is how we learned about Kamorta. That is how we learned from Kamorta was off way, but still we flew over Kamorta, from Kamorta to the next island, from next island to the next island. Then we landed up in the South Great Nicobar. And those days, Great Nicobar, we were not allowed to fly over the island because it was all jungle, a maiden jungle. No one had entered earlier. We were told not to fly. We did. On the coast, along the coast, we used to fly, and we did. And we were allowed to take photographs and put them all in the album, squadron album, and to say, yes, this is what it looked like. Those who haven't gone there will be able to understand how the village, the island looks like. So that one kind of experience one will never forget.
Super. Tell me about Antarctica. So, what is it flying like there?
No, I want to be very happy to say that I told you the offshore flying done in Bombay, offshore flying done in Andaman Nicobar Islands, made one of my QRs complete when they were looking for offshore qualified people for Antarctica expedition. So we put 3 helicopters in the ship with the rotors removed, and we went there, we flew and came, and that by itself can be a subject one day to tell the guys how the voyage was, how the helicopters were put together, how we flew there, where there was not a single navigation point, where your magnetic compass doesn't work because in the poles magnetic compass goes round and round. But those days we were very new with GPS, we didn't have the GPS on board. So we went by navigation, by, they say, the map reading is from place to place. Like the flying we did in the Car Nicobar, from one island to another island, we never left the sight of the ship we were operating from the helicopter. When we went to another place, we made a big kind of a flag there, a light there, or this thing. We tried putting some homing idea, but the later on may have come. I do not know. So the Antarctica experience was something unique because you have not seen a non-stop day for 4 months. You have not seen a non-stop. At least we didn't see the night, but the people who spent the night, they told us, yes, 2 months of dark night. 1 month before and after the dark night was the gray nights. Then the gray day starts. The full 24-hour day starts. Then goes into the cycle follows. There were people who spent 16 months in Antarctica, and we used to, of course, we go there for 4 months and come. It was all fun and games. And we, all flyers and the army guys, one this side, the other side was all educated elite. PhD is the minimum of the scientific guys. When we interacted, you can imagine what would happen. I learned the Alistair MacLean book in a different way from the geological guys who went there on board the ship.
Great. Wonderful conversation today. Thank you so much for your service, sir. Thank you very much for the time you've taken today to speak to the audience of the Blue Skies podcast.
Thank you so much, Dana.
Individuals who are before individually. Just need 70, like your report time southeast, connection for midway and people selected.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapathy.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.